You know you were an accident, right? I wanted a son. My father said that to me in front of 31 relatives after too many beers at our 4th of July cookout. We were standing in the yard my mother had carefully landscaped herself, every hydrangea planted by hand. Smoke from his new grill drifted behind him while Aunt Carol froze and dropped her plate into the grass. No one spoke. I stayed calm and answered, "That's strange because Mom told me something very different before she passed. Do you want me to read her letter?" His hand started to tremble. That letter held a secret he had hidden for 3 decades, and it didn't just spoil his holiday. It challenged the stories he'd told about my mother, about me, and even about who truly owned the house he always called his. If this story connects with you, consider liking and subscribing, and feel free to share where you're listening from. My name is Myra, I'm 28 and I work as an ICU nurse. Let me take you back 3 years before that holiday to the day my mother received her diagnosis. Our home on Maple Lane was a white colonial with green shutters and a porch that creaked in the same 3 spots every morning. My mother knew exactly where to step as she went outside barefoot to water her flowers before my father woke up. She moved quietly as if trying not to disturb the air itself, and I grew up thinking that was normal. My father, Rex Harper, had a worn brown recliner placed in the center of the living room like a command post. No one else sat in it. Not my mom, not me, not even guest. It symbolized how the house worked. He set the thermostat, controlled the television, decided the meals, and managed the money. My mother didn't have her own bank account. Every Monday she asked him for grocery cash and he counted it out slowly, bill by bill. I didn't realize how unusual that was until I saw a friend's mother casually pay with her own card at a store. Our house looked beautiful because my mom made it that way. Window boxes, herbs along the wall, a porch swing she found at a sale. She poured her creativity into that home because she had few other outlets. Still, my father called it, my roof, my rules, anytime we disagreed. What I didn't understand then was that the roof wasn't truly his. Rex believed without question that he was in charge, that women should stand behind the scenes, and that disagreement meant disrespect. "What do women know?" was something he repeated often. Whether the topic was finances at dinner or politics during family gatherings, he said the same thing to me when I told him I'd been accepted into the state nursing program. "Nursing? So you'll be cleaning up after people? Sounds about right for a girl." My mother didn't argue. When his voice rose, she went quiet. Her shoulders would tighten, her hands fold neatly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the table. I used to think that was patience. I later understood it was protection. One night when I was 16, he came home angry about something that went wrong at work and turned it on me. My grades, my friends, even my clothes. His voice took over the kitchen. I gripped the counter, determined not to cry. Behind him, my mother sat at the table. For a brief second, I saw her shoulders relax in relief because his anger wasn't aimed at her. Then she looked at me and that relief shifted into guilt. Later that night, after he fell asleep in his recliner, she came into my room and sat on my bed. "I'm sorry I can't protect you the way I should," she whispered. I told her it was okay. It wasn't. The call about her illness came on a Tuesday in March. I had just finished a long clinical shift and was sitting in my car when her name appeared on my phone. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. She said it softly, almost like she was apologizing for the trouble. I drove home immediately. When I arrived, my father was in the garage, not with her, wiping down his truck like always. He never missed a Saturday polishing that vehicle, but during 14 months of her treatments, he never once drove her to an appointment. I did. Every week. I sat beside her during chemotherapy, studied while medicine dripped into her veins, and drove her home afterward. My father's only comment was about dinner being late. During that time, my mother and Aunt Carol grew closer. Their phone calls stretched longer, and sometimes my mom would lower her voice when I entered the room. I assumed they were just talking more as sisters. I didn't realize they were quietly putting plans in place. My mother passed away on a Sunday in October. I was holding her hand when she let go. My father was downstairs watching a game. I arranged the funeral, made the calls, and wrote the obituary. He stayed in his chair, telling everyone he was too overwhelmed to manage anything. People believed him. 5 months later, he introduced Donna. She came to Sunday dinner dressed like she already belonged there, wearing a soft white sweater and heels that tapped loudly across my mother's hardwood floors. Without hesitation, she took my mother's seat at the table, the chair closest to the kitchen where Mom had sat every night for 30 years, and Rex acted like nothing was unusual. He sliced the roast with a proud smile, almost like it was a special occasion. Donna Kessler, a 40-year-old real estate agent with bright blonde highlights and a sharp, polished grin, looked completely at home. After we finished eating, Rex pushed a thick envelope toward me and said it was simple paperwork for Mom's estate, just routine legal forms that needed my signature. I was drained from months of grief, only 25 years old, and still trying to process the 14 long months of watching my mother slowly fade away. I signed most of the documents without reading carefully. There were 8 or 9 pages. I finished several before my pager went off for an emergency at the hospital. I rushed out, leaving the last pages unsigned, promising I'd handle them the next week. I didn't realize one of those unsigned papers was a quit-claim deed, and the power of attorney form I had signed earlier had already expired, even though Rex didn't seem to know that. Soon after that dinner he began making calls, not to me but to everyone else. First Uncle Bill, then Cousin Patty, then neighbors from Maple Lane and even women from my mother's old church circle. His story painted me as a cold daughter who had turned her back on her grieving father. In reality, I was working 4 night shifts a week in the ACU, spending my days off either sleeping or crying alone in my apartment. But his dramatic version spread quickly. One night, right after I lost a patient, Uncle Bill texted me saying my father was alone and that I was being selfish, followed by a link to an article about adult children neglecting aging parents. Standing in the hospital break room, still shaken from work, I felt that old guilt creeping in, the same feeling I had as a teenager when I thought everything was my fault. I tried to respond but deleted every message. When I finally called Uncle Bill the next morning to explain my schedule and the fact that Rex had never once visited me, he cut me off, saying a father is someone you only get once. That's when I stopped defending myself. I slowly realized some people don't truly want the truth. They just prefer a simple story. What I didn't know then was that Rex had a plan. The rumors weren't just about grief. They were part of something bigger. In April, I returned to the house on Maple Lane to pick up a box of my mother's belongings I had left upstairs. The front door was unlocked, and as I stepped inside, the house looked mostly the same. Rex's chair, the silent television, empty cans on the table. But the air felt different, carrying a sweet, artificial scent. Upstairs, my parents' bedroom door stood open. The wedding photo that had always hung above the dresser. My mother laughing in her ivory dress, her hand resting gently on my father's chest, was gone, though the nail remained in the wall. In its place was a framed beach sunset. My mother's oak vanity, where she had carefully applied her lipstick every morning even during her illness, was now covered with Donna's beauty products. Hairbrushes, makeup cases, and a bottle of Victoria's Secret body mist sat exactly where my mother's Chanel No. 5 used to be. The room felt unfamiliar, like her memory was being quietly packed away, piece by piece, and replaced without warning. Donna stepped out of the master bathroom wearing a soft robe, drying her hair like she had every right to be there. She looked at me calmly and said, "Your dad told me you wouldn't mind." From downstairs, Rex's voice cut through the house, telling me to stop snooping and reminding me that it wasn't my room anymore. For a second I almost walked out without saying a word, ready to grab my box and leave for good. But as I passed through the living room, something on the coffee table caught my eye. Under a TV guide was a folder with Donna's real estate logo on the front. Inside was a market report for 414 Maple Lane, estimating the house at $280,000. That's when it hit me, he wasn't just moving on. He was preparing to sell my mother's home. 2 weeks later, Rex called me himself, the first time in months. He invited me to dinner, saying Donna was making pot roast. That alone felt strange because my father never invited me anywhere. He usually just expected me to show up. When I arrived, the table was neatly set for 3 with cloth napkins and a candle, arranged carefully like a house showing. Dinner was polite but stiff. Rex acted unusually pleasant, interrupting me only a couple of times, which for him counted as restraint. After we finished eating, he pulled out another folder and placed it neatly on the table. He claimed the lawyer had forgotten one simple form that would transfer the property title to him for estate management. I opened it and saw the words "quit-claim deed," clearly stating the transfer of full ownership of 414 Maple Lane from my mother's estate to Rex. I read it twice to be sure. Donna stepped beside me with a pen, casually saying it was standard in real estate. I looked at my father and he gave me that familiar look, the silent command not to question him. I told him I wanted my own lawyer to review it. His expression changed instantly, asking if I didn't trust my own father. I calmly replied that if it was routine then waiting wouldn't matter. I took the document with me and drove straight to Aunt Carol's house. She lived just outside town in a quiet brick home and had worked as a CPA for 25 years. When I placed the deed on her kitchen table, she read it once and her face went still, like she had just confirmed something she already suspected. She told me clearly that the house was never my father's. My mother had bought it with inheritance money from the Whitmore family, and the deed was only in her name. Rex's name had never been on it. Then she explained that my mother had created a legal will with a lawyer named Richard Avery, and the house had already gone through probate. It belonged to me. I was the rightful owner. I could barely process it. For 30 years my father had called that house his. Carol then brought out a sealed envelope with my mother's handwriting on it, addressed to me. She said my mother told her to give it to me when the time was right. I held the letter carefully, feeling the weight of it in my hands. Carol advised me not to read it alone. That night, I sat in my car in her driveway for a long time, engine off, holding the final words my mother had left behind, knowing that everything I thought I understood about my father had just changed forever. That I kept thinking about all the times my father had said, "My house, my rules," and how my mother must have heard that, fully aware the house was never his, yet choosing to stay silent. She couldn't stand up to him openly while she was alive, so she protected me the only way she could, through legal documents. The next morning I called the office of Richard Avery. His receptionist connected me almost immediately, which made it clear he knew I would be calling. His voice was steady and careful, the kind of lawyer who studies every detail before putting pen to paper. Exactly what my mother had needed. He told me he had honestly expected my call for about a year. He confirmed that the will was valid, properly filed and already completed through probate. The deed for 414 Maple Lane was in my mother's name alone, and when she passed, ownership legally transferred to me as the sole beneficiary. The title was clean. My father had no legal right to the property. Mr. Avery explained that Rex could live there only as a guest, but he could not sell it, refinance it, or claim ownership without my signed approval on a quit-claim deed, which explained why he had pressured me. Then Mr. Avery added something more troubling. About 18 months before my mother died, Rex had tried to take out a second mortgage on the house. The bank rejected it because his name wasn't on the deed. When my mother found out, she contacted Aunt Carol, finalized her will and created a trust. That trust held $220,000 from her personal inheritance, and I was the beneficiary. Rex had no access to it and didn't even know its current value. I sat there in my apartment, stunned, realizing my mother had carefully planned every step while she was quietly fighting for me. A week later, Rex invited me to a 4th of July barbecue and told me to bring the paperwork signed. I said I would come, but I wasn't bringing his form. I was bringing my mother's documents instead. That afternoon, the house looked festive, almost like a holiday postcard. A brand new Weber Genesis grill stood on the patio, decorations covered the porch, and a long table stretched across the yard filled with food and coolers. More than 30 guests were there, family, neighbors, coworkers, and church friends, all gathered like an audience. Donna stood confidently near the center in a white dress, greeting people as if she owned the place. I arrived straight from a 12-hour hospital shift, still wearing my wrinkled blue scrubs and ID badge. I hadn't changed on purpose. Everyone there knew I worked long nights and had been beside my mother through her illness. My uniform quietly reminded them of that truth. Aunt Carol sat toward the back, calm and observant, and when I walked in she met my eyes and gave me a small, steady nod. In my pocket was the envelope my mother had left me, along with a notarized copy of the will and the official deed printout. For the first time I wasn't walking into that yard unsure of myself. I was walking in prepared. My father noticed the moment I walked in, and he quickly saw that my hands were empty. No folder, no signed papers. His smile didn't fade, but his eyes lost their warmth. "There she is," he called out loudly, telling everyone he had asked me to come and that I finally listened. By late afternoon he had already finished several beers. I kept track without even trying. Working in the ACU teaches you to notice patterns, to observe when someone crosses a line. Around his 4th drink his tone shifted. He moved closer to the grill where everyone naturally gathered, flipping burgers and talking louder than necessary. He shared old stories about his work, his truck project years ago, and moments when he believed he had proven himself right. Each story centered on him, told with growing volume and confidence. After another drink, he steered the conversation toward family. Loud enough for nearby guests to hear, he said he had always expected to have a son, someone to carry on his name and business. He laughed as if it were harmless humor, and a few people gave awkward smiles. Donna quietly handed him another beer, almost encouraging him. I sat at the far end of the long table in a low folding chair, slightly lower than everyone else, eating slowly and keeping quiet. Then I saw it happen, the moment he decided to push further. He stood up straighter, cleared his throat, and after a long sip, said clearly that I had been an accident. He added that he had wanted a boy. The yard fell silent all at once. Conversations stopped. Even the kids grew quiet. Every pair of eyes turned toward me. Aunt Carol's plate slipped from her hands into the grass, but she didn't bend down to pick it up. Rex continued, saying my mother had insisted on keeping me, then pointing at me and criticizing my career and finances. The words hung heavily in the warm evening air. Just then, Donna stepped forward holding the familiar folder and a polished silver pen. In a calm, almost rehearsed tone, she said he only needed my signature so he could take care of the house, adding that it was what my mother would have wanted. She set the papers in front of me beside my plate as casually as if offering dessert. Rex turned to the crowd and framed it as a simple family issue, claiming I was being difficult over routine paperwork. From his chair, Uncle Bill called out for me to just sign it. The pressure in the yard felt thick, but I stayed seated, knowing this moment was exactly what my mother had prepared me for. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," someone muttered from the crowd, a distant relative I barely recognized. Another voice added softly, "Poor Rex, he just wants to keep the house." I could feel all 31 pairs of eyes on me, some kind, some uneasy, some avoiding me completely. I looked at the pen, then at the paper, then at my father standing proudly in the yard my mother had once cared for so lovingly. He wore the confidence of a man who had rarely been challenged. Inside my scrub pocket, I felt the envelope my mother left me pressing against my side, steady and grounding. I picked up the pen and held it over the line where my name was printed. For a brief second, I truly understood my mother. I understood the pressure, the way your body calculates the cost of saying no before your mind finishes the thought. If I signed, the tension would end. If I agreed, the silence would break and I could walk away. I finally grasped how she had lived for years choosing peace over confrontation, not because she lacked strength, but because standing firm often meant being labeled the problem. My father watched me closely, and I saw the quick flash of confidence in his eyes. He thought the crowd and the pressure would win again. In a softer voice, he warned me not to embarrass him in front of everyone. The yard was still except for small sounds. The rustle of a chair, a child's whimper, the grill popping in the background. I held the pen for a few long seconds, then carefully placed it back down beside the document, straight and steady the way I place medical tools at work. "No," I said calmly. "I'm not signing this. Not now. Not ever." The silence shifted, no longer shock but expectation. My father's face darkened with anger. He began calling me ungrateful, then compared me to my mother, saying we were both stubborn and worthless. He spoke louder, making sure everyone heard him. He dismissed my mother's life as meaningless and accused me of causing a scene over something simple. Donna tried to calm him, but he brushed her aside. Around us, people froze. Uncle Bill stiff in his chair, Cousin Patty pulling her child closer, neighbors staring at their plates. Then my father crossed a line he should never have crossed. In a low, controlled tone, he insulted my mother's strength and her ability to raise me. The yard grew so quiet I could hear a flag snapping in the distance. His words about me I could handle, I had heard them for years. But speaking about my mother that way, that was something I would not carry any longer. He had insulted the one person who had quietly prepared me for this very moment. The woman who spent her final months making sure I would be protected. When he spoke about my mother that way, something inside me became firm and clear. I stood up slowly, calmly, the same way I rise at a patient's bedside when things turn critical, steady and focused. I pushed the quit-claim deed back across the table until it stopped near a dish of baked beans. I repeated that I would not sign it, not now, not ever. He tried to respond, but for once he seemed lost for words. I told him to choose his next comment about my mother carefully. When he challenged me, I reached into the pocket over my heart and pulled out the cream-colored envelope my mother had written. I held it up so everyone could see it. I told him that before she passed, she had left me something to read. The yard grew quiet again. His hand trembled slightly around his drink. He didn't know what the letter said, but he knew her well enough to understand